Alright, all. So to my two and only viewers, Phil, you owe Joe $5. I wasn't actually dead. I have not posted a video on YouTube in years. Simple reason, I wasn't very good at. It's much harder to do than I was expecting, and it's clearly out of my skill bracket. But I was really curious in this role-playing game, and while I was curious in it, and while I was looking into it, there was barely any information on it available. So even though I suck, and this video quality is going to be very below par, I felt I should post a video reviewing this role-playing game because I finally got my hands on it. I finally got to read it and see what it was all about, and the videos on this are very light. There's a couple of playthrough videos that were released a little more than a year ago, but that was when this was only in playtesting and they hadn't fine-tuned the rules yet, and a lot of the rules were unknown, and there's no real video going over those new rules and how the game works in its current form. And I finally got the book, and I think it's a different enough system to warrant a full review, and I wish I knew more before I got it, but it turned out it was good, worth the purchase, very glad I got it, but I felt I should make a proper video covering this role-play game now that I got my hands on it. And that role-play game is Tales of Xadia, the role-play game based off of the Dragon Prince TV show on Netflix, which supposedly will someday, maybe 500 years from now, get a season 4. The show's middle ground. I was more curious about the game system because of its game mechanics. So let's go over that. Let's go over what this game is. So this is a role-play game like Dungeons and Dragons, 5th edition, or I've played it Alien RPG, or Pathfinder 2, 2nd edition. But this is very different from other role-playing game systems. It's based off of the Dragon Prince TV show from Netflix, but you don't have to be a fan of that show to watch this. I actually would suggest it's better if you don't base it off the show. I'll come back to that point. But it is a very different system in the fact that it doesn't use maps or tokens. It just uses dice and only dice, and that's it. Which makes it in and of itself very different from most role-playing games you might have tried, like Dungeons and Dragons 5e, which does use maps and tokens. This does not. So first of all, the cons with this, the pitfalls with this game system. So when you hear no dice and no maps and you don't have to make that stuff and you can just skip it all, which is the case in this game system, and you also hear that's based off of the show The Dragon Prince, which is a show for tweens and younger audiences, you're thinking, this is probably easy game system. This is probably something good for newcomers. I'm probably taking an easy street by checking out this game system. That is not the case here. This is not an insult against the game system. Some people like more complicated games and more complicated rule sets. Some people like easier games and easier rule sets. There's no good, there's no bad, it's personal preference. The problem is that you really have the mindset going in that this is going to be an easy, simple thing, and this is not. This is number crunch. This is number crunchy. This is very number crunchy. That's not bad, that's not good, it's all personal preference, but you have the wrong mindset when you initially get your hands on this book. When you start reading this, there's a lot more crunch than what you're expecting, and there's a bit of a learning curve. This is crunchy. This is definitely a couple of steps up above Dungeons and Dragons 5e and Alien RPG. It's not into the territory of like Mutants and Masterminds or Pathfinder 2nd edition, but this is more crunchy than you might be expecting. It's definitely one of the crunchier role-playing games I've looked over. Con number 2. Now, every role-playing game that has ever been made by humanity has had this flaw, but it seemed to show off a lot more in this book than in other role-playing games I'm familiar with. So con number 2, there's a lot of parts in this book that refer to rules explained later in the book. So I'll be explaining one rule, and I'll be like, to find out about this rule in relation to this other rule works this way, and whereas this other rule, you flip further and you find out later on, and then you have to backtrack to fully understand things. Every role-playing game ever has this writing flaw in it somewhere, but it seems to happen a lot more in this book. Also, every now and then it references something that doesn't happen in the book. Like there's one part where it references plot points, which is a game mechanic, and says there's a list of plot points that the DM can use and how the game master can use them. That part is not in the book. There's no part that lists off different things that the game master can use the plot points for. Now, I can fill in the blanks and be like, well, of course the game master can do all the things with it that the players can do. You know, simple filling in the blanks. But I alluded to something that wasn't in the book, and then I flipped through the whole book and I couldn't find it. So the book should have been looked over once or twice more to kink out these rough edges and make it a little bit easier to read, especially since some people might be drawn towards this game because they think it might be easier when it's not. If this is your first role-playing game and you grab this because you thought it might be easier, it's going to be daunting and actually might scare you away a bit. So that is a con. That is a con. But if you're like me and you've done a fair number of role-playing games before, you should be well prepared for this. Very well prepared. Which brings us to the pros. This, of course, does not use maps or tokens. Now, you still have to do some stuff. You still have to figure out the story you want to tell, and you still have to figure out the NPCs the players may bump into, and you still have to figure out how you're going to explain the situation, the plot, and yada, yada, yada. But I can't tell you the number of times I ran a Dungeons and Dragons game, and I came up with like a massive dungeon, and then the party avoided said dungeon. And it's so hard making the right combat encounters and balancing it out, and making the right dungeons and balancing them out, and making sure you don't give out too many magical items. This cuts all of that. It cuts all of that. And you could, in theory, like run a whole game of this off the top of your head extremely easily. As said, the rules are chunky. It's a bit hard to wrap your mind around the rules, but once you get it, once you're able to follow it, implementing this game and actually running a session would be so easy and cut down on so much time. You're talking about in Dungeons & Dragons 5e or Alien RPG, taking 5, 6, 7 hours to make a dungeon, 7 hours to get ready for a game in some cases, if it's detailed enough, to 12 minutes. And you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Like this, you can completely improvise if you were forced to very easily. That's the big plus. The second plus, and this is the second big one, was not advertised on this. It's not made clear in the rules. It's not on the back of the book as a suggestion. It is completely hidden. And that is, if you run this, do not run it based off of the Dragon Prince. Don't do it. You are hampering yourself from a fantastic game if you are doing that. Because in this game, flying, dark vision, swimming for the sea and breathing underwater, and a lot of other mechanics are just handled by what's called area distinctions. And that's it. It's a very minor thing that doesn't have much impact on the game. So in other words, you could be huge or you could be small and it has no impact. And also, according to the rules, you yourself, the player, decides the damage type they do. Doesn't make no difference as long as you're not doing damage with corrupting magic. If you want to do fire damage, fine. If you want to cause exhaustion, it's fine. If you want to cause fear, it's fine. It's all the same. And you make up your character by just picking very simple feats, which are very easy to modify and very easy to reflavor. And you just cross and staple feats where you think they're appropriate. You take all that stuff together, and it translates to you can very easily make any type of fantasy creature or make any type of fantasy class you can think of really easily. If you've been playing Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games for a long time, and your players have always fought the Beholder or the Mind Flayer or the Big Trask, this is the game where the player could, if they wanted to, make a beholder for themselves to play or make a Trask for themselves to play, and they could play that thing and have a blast. If you want to be a giant dragon that shoots out fire from their mouth and be like 20 stories high and have red scales and fly around, you can do that in this. Really easy. It takes about 5 minutes. It's really, really easy. It's a point buy system with the stats, and you just buy the stats that work for that, and you buy the feat that makes sense for that, and you just use flying as an area distinction, and you're done. You did it. You made a playable dragon character. And the great thing about this is they're all balanced. It's such a simple system that they're all balanced with each other. So you can have a dragon, you can have a regular Joe character, and the dragon will not necessarily outshine the Joe character. You can do it in this. You can do it. It's possible. It exists. It's real. It's amazing. That is the number one reason to get this system. It's very cool. Very cool. And as I read it, and as I realized what you could do in this system, my whole mind just lit up. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. So, yeah, the possibilities of, if you were creative enough, you could really just create anything. And I know you can do that in Dungeons and Dragons to a degree, but you can't really. You can't really. It's not balanced. It's not really built for it. You have to get approved by the DM, and rightfully so. And chances are they won't let pass. You know, like they have the custom lineage thing in Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Try to use that to make a mind flare. You can't. You can't. You could in this. So that is definitely one of the big benefits. And there's a few other benefits to this system. Like, I like the whole stress mechanic. I like how everything you do, no matter how small, can hurt and wear down your character over time. If you ever roll a 1 while doing something, it hurts your character to an extent. So the idea is that the daily activities of life wear you down, which is true. Now, they won't necessarily always hurt you physically. It could scare you or exhaust you or do something else to you. But there's a real sense that your character's worn down over time by the stuff that happens to them. And that's kind of a really cool real factor that this game has that other game systems tend to not touch. Now, we've gone over and the game is full of like all kinds of little weird, little cool, unique mechanics like that. If you like unique, one-of-a-kind mechanics, you'll probably like this system. But that brings us to the middle ground. There are 2 rules in this that are really weird that could be a pro or could be a con. They're just so different, and so few other game systems have tried them out in the role-playing game system, that's hard to say. So number 1, controversial, I'll call them, controversial rules, is if you do a medicine check and try to heal someone in this, and you mess up bad enough, you will hurt them more, and you could end up killing them. Keep that in mind. You could end up killing them with a bad medicine check. I'd hate to be the player that does a medicine check to try out a fellow player and ends up killing them. Thing number 2, you gain experience through character growth, which is a great idea. Great idea, but when you gain experience, you actually gain it through dice. And then when you eventually level up with like a milestone or the end of a major quest, the DM is going to have you roll those dices to see if you succeed on a challenge to go up. So you might not go up. Now you can always use these dice again next time you maybe go up, and you could use them for other things in the game to help you out in the short term. So you're not wasting them if you don't go up. But still, there's a possibility you won't and the other player will, which makes it, in my mind, kind of controversial. Because you might not succeed and might not go up, and another player could go up a whole bunch. And depending on what you think of character growth, you might not get as many dice if you didn't grow as much as a character as some of the other players. So there is that. But I will state that a character way higher level isn't going to be a lot stronger than you. Characters don't really progress a lot. They do progress a lot, but they don't progress in that they become like gods comparing to each other. Last thing that should have gone in the pro category is Callus. This is a system that I wish was in all role-playing games, but this is the first role-playing game I've looked into that actually had it, which is kind of sad. And that is that this game system has a way to create a non-player character that very easily can be modified and go up in levels over time, and that your players interacting with them will change their personality and their stats and how they interact with you. I.e., great system for an ongoing bad guy, ongoing main bag that is always attacking the party and growing with them and is a significant threat. You can't do that in other role-playing game systems. If you do that in like Dungeons and Dragons and you grab a stat block, your party's going to fight that character and die. or you're not going to be able to introduce that character until the very end, and you just have to slightly allude to them every now and then. They don't really feel like an ongoing character. This, you have a character that grows over time, and you can have them bump into your party a whole lot. Also, it's very hard to kill the Catalyst, because not only do you have to knock them down to 0, you then would have to hit them like 4 or 5 times while they're knocked out to kill them. Smacking someone over the head like 5 freaking times while they're down on the ground is pretty morbid. A lot of players won't be able to do that. And on top of that, the Catalyst has one of their abilities that they can get, if you so deem it, is literally a get out of jail free card. They can literally pull a power that just allows them to leave the fight and not get taken out if they get in a jam. I am not kidding. That is literally a power that they have. So you can easily make this a reoccurring character and make them come back over and over and over again very easily. Very easily. And remember, in this game you actually have several different types of health, and only one of them, injury, would cause your character to be knocked out. So if your players were attacking the Callus, the main bad, with like fear and were trying to scare them, you could just say they ran away. You know, it's so easy to not have them die in this. But yeah, that's pretty much everything to this game. Oh, and that's another really unique thing about this game. It has several different life stats. Fear, exhaustion, injury, and several others. So the idea is, if you're flying and the other person is stationary, they might not be able to swing their sword at you, but they could still attack you by throwing insults up at you and making you feel insecure. And that's one of the reasons why flying doesn't unbalance the game. So all those are very unique things. It's very hard to say how this game will feel when I actually play it, but it's so unique, I definitely want to try it out. And like I said, I really do wish other game systems had a Catalyst system, and I really do wish in other game systems it was so blasted easy to just make anything. Like, this feels so liberating. I don't know if it'll be fun to play. Could be not fun at all because of the few cons that I mentioned. But the idea of just letting players play whatever they want really does sound fun. And that is not stated in the advertisements for that, which was one of the reasons why I thought I will make a very crappy YouTube video and let people know that that's a thing in this game and it is a cool thing, but they'll have to deal with my crappy voice and my crappy production quality, and they'll just have to deal with it. But yeah, is it the best system? No, my personal pick for the best system is Xadia RPG. This is a good system, and if you want something very, very different, this might be a system to check out. The Tales of Xadia, the Dragon Prince, good system. Enjoy, and if you did try it out, tell me what you thought. Cheers.